Okay, we are going to have our next presentation now. As you've noticed, we've been trying to get a wide range of topics that we've been addressing today. A lot of, we've had the political, had the food, some other energy, and in continuing in the vein of energy, and some very practical things that we can be working towards. I'd like to welcome David Hribnak. David has been actively finding ways to reduce his carbon footprint over the years. His projects have included designing and building 2 massive solar homes. Not massive. We do need to get rid of the massive homes, but that's another story. Built on an electric, he built an all-electric Jeep and Miata, and I found out today that one of my good friends, Candy, helped him with the Jeep, so that was nice. He modified his Prius and Avalanche into plug-in electrics, and finally added solar photovoltaic side to his home. He offsets over 90% of the electricity used for the home in both plug-in cars. David's driven all his electric cars across Tennessee several times to the Electric Vehicle Conversion Conference, showing long-distance electric travel is possible. David is active in the community as a Boy Scout leader, Habitat for Humanity volunteer, and a mentor with the Dobbins-Bennett First Robotics program. With his church, he is leading the Energy Task Force as a way to reduce energy costs. So please welcome David Hribnak from Kingsport.
Thank you very much. And this is a topic I'm really passionate about, how you, all of us here, can make a difference and make a real difference. A little bit of background. I'm a retired engineer from Eastman Chemical. When I first got out, we designed and then built a passive solar earth-burned house that our family of 4 lived in. At 1,700 square feet, I'm not sure I'd call it massive, but our average electric bill on that all-electric house was $47 a month. I then went on to convert the Avalanche into a plug-in, all-electric Jeep that Tandy did help me with, and our current well-insulated passive solar house that we now power with solar, including our cars. First, I wanted to talk about why we need to make a difference. When you look at where CO2 comes from in the United States, this personal homes is a big part of the pie. Actually, the biggest part of the pie. All of us collectively, through our homes and our personal transportation, is bigger than industry, commercial buildings, and even agriculture. So if we go along and if we follow the scientific recommendation that we've got to cut our fossil fuel usage by 80%, there's no way it can be done unless we all get on board. So in the United States, the average person or the average household is 21 tons of CO2 a year, each and every year. Basically, if this were water or let's say manure that you can see, it's about 10 times what we put into the trash or put into our landfills every year. It's just an invisible gas that we don't see, but it's much a bit of extra pollution and changing the air quality in our cities. Well, I was thinking that we were likely doing good. We had a passive solar house. Our energy costs were less than about half of our energy. But when I actually sat down and went through the numbers, I was shocked and dismayed to find that not only were we not better than average, we were actually about 7% worse than the average across America. So our personal footprint was about 22 tons of CO2 a year, emissions a year. And this was a real eye-opening experience for me. And one thing I want to ask you is, before I get into this, how many of you think it can be reasonably done where we could cut our CO2 emissions by 80% or more? Are there any? I see a few hands out here, but not many. I'll ask this again at the end. So when I looked at my personal usage, the biggest here was gasoline and the oil refining down here that goes with that gasoline usage. So the first thing I ended up working on...
Look at the one on your right.
Yeah.
You look to your left. Look at that screen.
Okay?
That's all right.
So the first thing I did was look at my vehicles. In the work I'd done with the plug-ins, I've realized how much better emission-wise electric vehicles are than regular gasoline-powered cars. So back in 2009, we were driving about 25,000 miles a year, a little bit above average. My wife and I, the biggest offender was that Avalanche, which was a larger car, but I had two larger teenagers, and with the scout troop taking all the equipment camping, that truck came in very handy. But it also produced quite a bit of emissions every year, about 10 tons every year. We had the Prism, at 29 miles a gallon was, I thought, a pretty good car, but even there, that's another 9,000 pounds of emissions every year. And the other thing I realized, if we kind of use $3 a gallon gas, that's also $3,700 a year I was spending in fuel. Not an insignificant amount of money. So now let's fast forward to today. We have tried to reduce some of our driving, and we have made some progress there, 21,000 miles last year. We now have an all-electric Tesla Roadster, and we have an electric Volt or a plug-in Volt, where we get about half of our driving with all-electric, and the other half is kind of like it switches to Prius mode for longer trips, and that's typically our gasoline usage. And by moving to an electric car and a plug-in hybrid, we were able to reduce our emissions by 10 tons. And this is using AEP power that is 73% coal. It's one of the worst in the country. But even at the coal-based power, an electric vehicle, because it's so much more efficient, is actually less emissions per mile than some of your cleanest gasoline cars. And after we went to these electric cars, I realized we were saving about $2,500 a year in fuel costs, because getting your electricity for fuel, it's like getting gasoline for 85 cents a gallon. And we've seen gasoline costs drop here to a little bit over $2 a gallon, but still that's a lot more than 85 cents a gallon equivalent on gasoline. So Tesla Roadster, it's eye candy. It's kind of a bit of a sports car, but as I told my wife and how I got there to get it, it was the most energy efficient car I could get. If you look at it, 119 miles per gallon equivalent. That's better, more than double the Prius that she was driving at that point in time. EPA fuel cost was less than half the cost of a Prius. And for me, the big thing was the CO2 per mile was significantly better than the Prius. About 0.39 pounds per mile versus a half a pound per mile on a Prius using gasoline. Now I also threw in the Chevy Corvette there, and the reason being the electric motor of the car allows absolutely outstanding acceleration. The Roadster will handily beat that Corvette, and it'll outrun the Corvette. So here you have a car that is faster and outperforms the best muscle car that Detroit can make, but yet is greener to drive than a Prius. The Roadster has about 235 mile electric range. 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds. And these were kind of a hand-built kind of proof of concept to get Tesla started. And back in this point in time, Tesla's plan was to come out with a fancy car that would catch people's imagination to prove that electrics can be fun, fast, and go far. Then build a mid-price kind of high-end sedan, which they're doing right now, and later this year is when they're supposed to come out with their mass market car, basically about $35,000 a year, which when you compare fuel costs over 5 years is cheaper than a Camry.
You meant 35,000 cost.
35,000 costs, yes. They're supposed to be making about 400,000 of these a year, so they're planning on a big scaling up. The new Chevy Volt, and my wife drives a Volt now, basically it acts as a full electric for about 50 miles. So for most of your trips around town, to and from the grocery store, to and from church, to your meetings, can all be done cleanly on electricity. But then when you want to go for a longer trip on the road, then the gas engine kind of kicks in and it drives a lot like a Prius for highways. And yes, you can still tow. This is our Popup Camper, that the Volt with the great torque of that electric engine, and we're planning to go around Lake Superior and out to Banff and Jasper National Parks later this year with a Volt towing our little solar powered by the way, little Popup Camper.
Sorry, got ahead of us.
Okay,
I hope this will work.
he's trying to play a video here, but we're not seeing it all. Okay, let's, can we scan for that?
Yeah, why don't we cancel it?
Okay. What I was going to try to show is a commercial that was put out by Nissan. It didn't get much airplay, but it was a real funny view of the world of what if everything ran on gas, including your microwave, your hair dryer, your iPhone, your telephones, and you know what life would be like with everything being gas. And it kind of okay.
Try again?
No. Carry on.
Okay. So now with the electric vehicles, we've eliminated 10 tons, and that was the biggest part of our personal carbon footprint. So we still use some gasoline for when we travel on trips to visit parents and family out of town, but now the biggest part of our personal slice was electricity. Before I talk about my personal story, I just want to make sure and kind of reiterate, solar is literally going through the roof. It is absolutely outstanding what is going on, mostly outside of the United States when it comes to solar. But even in the United States, last year we added the equivalent of 17 nuclear power plants worth of solar generating capability. Last year, we added more solar than all fossil fuels combined in the United States. Now, the world has already been there, and they've been adding more wind and solar than fossil fuels for the last 7 years running. You hear about China and India and all the new coal plants they're building? Their coal use is actually going down. So where all this coal jobs are going to come back to and what we're going to do with all this coal, I don't know, because around the world it's dropping. Anyways, when you look at that chart in the United States, we aren't the leaders, we aren't second, we aren't third, we're not even in the top 5 as far as solar goes. Trip to Austria, taking the trains, going through the countryside. Trains, by the way, are all electric over there. Virtually every farmhouse, every little village has solar out in the fields or on the farms or on their barns. It's absolutely amazing. China, is well ahead of the United States, and they're building the majority of solar plants. Now, this was back in 2014, and they were hoping that, looking at current growth, that in 2019, the world would put in another 67 megawatts, which is the equivalent of 67 nuclear power plants in 2019. But last year, 3 years ahead of schedule, we actually installed 76 gigawatts, or the equivalent of 76 nuclear power plants around the world. Every year, solar continues to exceed expectations, and I hope that continues. So we tried to go solar ourselves. We've been solar now for about 3.5 years. We've got an 8 kilowatt system on our roof, 31 panels. We are grid tied, so on a day, well, probably like right now, we've got moderate sunlight. My meter is essentially running backwards. Unlike the TVA program, I'm on Appalachian Electric Power. I cannot make money. I cannot get a check. I have to pay the connection fee, but I can zero out my net usage. So here's a copy of my solar, or of my electric bill, and people ask, does solar pay? Well, that's my electric bill.
Wow.
$13 in 6 months, or $13.06 a month. Just got my last electric bill this morning, so I couldn't share this. But I've now gone 13 months where we've actually had zero net usage. So over the last 13 months, we've actually produced more power than we've used. Question?
And you're fueling your cars with it?
So, and that includes 1,000 miles of driving in our electric cars. So, think of how much you spend in 3 tanks of gasoline. How much do you spend for your electricity? It's true the solar was not cheap. In my case, it was about $19,000. But a lot of us will pay $19,000 for a car. It's within the realm of possibility that we could afford that if that's what our priorities are. And I often ask, does solar work in the winter? And the answer is yes, but with an asterisk, because it's not quite as efficient on the shorter days of winter. But I found that typically with the dark surface, it's the last place the snow will lay, and it's the first place it'll melt off of. So we actually make snow virtually every day of the year, or make power. I also found out that maybe in East Tennessee I'm a little bit of a crazy radical, not many, but when I check with fellow EV drivers, I found out 60% of them power their cars on solar, and another 26% hope to. So, we've cut our gasoline bill about $2,500 a year. We've cut our electric bill about $1,000 a year, so that's an extra $3,500 in our pocket. Yes?
What is your take on that extra $100 you're going to have to spend now to register your car every year because it's electric?
I'm probably mostly okay with that, in that we use the roads. Somebody's got to pay for the roads. So I'm okay with paying for the roads. The only quibble I have is I could argue that it should maybe be $70. You know, it's like, why should I pay less than, a Prius or a compact car? But, that's not worth losing any sleep over or getting a big fight over. But I think EVs do use the roads, so it's only fair that we pay for our share of the roads, in my opinion. Okay, so now with solar production, we're now producing not 90%, but 100% of our power. So that's another 6 tons of emissions, 7 tons of emissions I've been able to take out of the equation. So now we've gone from 7% above average to now we're 73% below average. Now, I don't want you to forget about the little things, and this is where a lot of people start. You heard several people talk today about Energy Star appliances and heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, geothermal heat pumps. Yes, those things typically cost a little bit more, but when you look at the life of your heat pump, you look at the life of the Energy Star refrigerator over its life, you'll always find it'll save you money. Look 5-10 years into the future. And we do have a battery-powered lawnmower, and battery-powered chainsaw, battery-powered leaf blower. We've kind of eliminated, because seriously, that gasoline in your garage, that is a significant hazard. And as was also mentioned today, an incredible revolution has gone in light bulbs. The price per bulb for an LED is around $2.25 now at Lowe's. Compact fluorescents are about $1.50, and incandescents are about $95. So a lot of times I'll go into schools and ask the kids, well, which is the cheapest? Well, the answer may surprise you, because that LED typically lasts about 20 times longer than incandescent bulbs. So when you look at how many bulbs you have to buy for, let's say, running something 25,000 hours, all of a sudden the LED bulbs don't look so expensive. It's the guy from Johnson City Power Board or Johnson City Municipal. They had 2 crews going around keeping up with their lights. Now it's a very part-time assignment. And as they found out, the watts per bulb is 9 watts for an LED versus 60 watts for an incandescent. And as, I don't know about you, but my house has switched. I now spend more for cooling in the summer than I do heating in the winter. I used to spend more for winter heating, but now I spend more summer cooling. Whenever you have incandescent bulbs, put your hand on it. That's adding to your air conditioning, so every time you turn on the light, that's like also turning up your air conditioner a little bit more, because you've got to pull that out. So if you look over the entire life, an LED bulb is about $22 over a 25,000 hour life versus $155 for an incandescent bulb. So I've used this at our church, I've used this personally. I typically hate to throw out things, and if it comes time to throw something out, take it to Habitat, take it to the resale store. Incandescent lights, they go in the trash. I don't want to give anybody that kind of a burden and waste that kind of energy. But here's another use of lighting I want you guys to think about a little bit. Typically, your house, I'm sure you have at least 30 light bulbs. And those light bulbs are probably on maybe 4 hours a day on the average. So if you convert to LED, that's 51 watts savings, or about 184 kilowatts a month. And that could save you a nice $16 a month in utility bills. But here's the other thing that gets me so excited about the future. That's also the same as driving an electric vehicle 600 miles. So, if all of us here were to buy an electric vehicle and replace our light bulbs to LED, and we could get everybody to do that across the United States, we would take our imported oil from 48% to 0. We wouldn't have to build a single power plant. We wouldn't have to build a single transmission line. We don't have to burn any more fuel just by converting to state-of-the-art lighting and electric vehicles that are now available from all of our manufacturers. And of course, reduce, reuse, and recycle. I'm sure all of you, I'm preaching to the choir here. So we've managed to go from 7% above average to now we're 85% below average. So I'm thoroughly convinced that an 80% reduction is possible. And it is possible without breaking the bank and ruining our lifestyle, throwing everybody out of work. It can be done. I believe that's what, 19 tons of CO2 is averted every year. We're saving about $3,500 a year. So in summary, not only is 80% possible, we found out in many ways it's better. So, can I take any questions? Yes, ma'am.
All the batteries you have in your car, your lawnmower, are those recyclable, or what happens to them?
Yes, the batteries are recyclable. Lithium batteries are recyclable. I know Battery Plus will take them. For electric cars, they're still kind of new, but I do know the new Tesla Gigafactory that they're building, they already have the recycling line up and tested, and it's there so that when batteries reach their end of life, they're able to bring it back into the factory and recover those materials. So yes, absolutely, the batteries can be recycled. Yes, ma'am?
In your net zero calculations, have you included the cost of manufacturing all of these products?
I have not included the cost of manufacturing because I assume they're essentially equivalent. If you're going to buy a car, they have very similar. There's been some calculations done that say EVs and the battery production are more energy intensive. Those have since been proven false. A lot of those studies were done by Statoil, a number of oil companies, and like one of the studies I know, they didn't have an electric car, or they scaled up a what was it? They scaled up a fork truck, and they said the inverter used like 35 pounds of copper in it. The inverter that converts electricity. Well, it doesn't have 35 pounds of copper because the Nissan Leaf, the total inverter box and everything is only 20 pounds. So we found a lot of ways, and there's actually more rare metals in your typical car, catalytic converters, the palladium, the platinum in those. There's actually more rare earth metals in a standard car than in electric cars.
Can I make one more?
Absolutely.
Just talk about the drippage and the fluids that most other cars use. That you
As you probably heard, when it first starts raining, you got to be extra careful on the roads because all the cars going down the roads are typically dripping a little bit of oil and seeping oil. Well, one of the things I didn't tell you, basically there is no transmission in like the Tesla or your EVs. So you don't have any transmission fluid, you don't have those seals, you don't have those problems. Oh, there's no oil changes either. So you don't have to bother to schedule oil changes. There's no pressurized cooling, so you don't have antifreeze leaking on the road. There's no tune-ups, there's no, there's a lot of additional savings that I didn't bother going into here. Sorry.
Oh, no. Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
For those of us who aren't engineers and don't have your skills, but might want to convert our car to battery, how would we go about that?
The question was, how could you convert a car to a battery? The short answer is, I would not recommend it unless you have a car you really love and want to follow. The reason being is, right now with the mass manufacturers making the Nissan Leaf, the BMW i3, I could buy a new Leaf cheaper than I can buy all the components to convert your car to electric. Can it be done? Absolutely. But it's got to be more of a hobby, labor of love, because when you're buying all those components kind of one-off and engineering them one-off, it's actually more expensive than buying, let's say, a brand new Nissan Leaf. But it can be done, and if you want to do it, talk to Tandy and I afterwards.
All right, two quick things. There are some chairs available for those of y'all standing in the back, so please feel free to move forward. The representative from the People's Climate March was going to say a quick bit. Where are you? Yeah, please. We just, yeah.
I'll just do it. I thought it was a group effort.
Yeah, please come forward. There's chairs right here. So please join us.
Comfortable here.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to let everybody know about the event that a group of us, and they're supposed to be up here with me. I don't know where they went. I guess Carol and others. We are having a climate day next Saturday. It's in conjunction with the National People's Climate March that's going to be taking place in Washington, D.C., and also many other sister marches across the country and the world. But we are going to have our own version here in the Tri-Cities. We have 3 events that go along with this climate march. At 9 o'clock at Southside School here in the historic True Streets neighborhood, we're going to have an event called Pedaling for the Planet. It's a family-friendly bike ride, about 2 miles, pretty flat terrain, and we're asking children and others to decorate their bikes or decorate themselves with a theme of climate or Mother Earth or their favorite animal or whatever. So that'll be about an hour bike ride. And then at 10:30, we're going to convene at the intersection of University Parkway and State of Franklin. We will have free parking on the ETSU campus, parking lot 9, which is right across from that brown field that Phil was talking about earlier. But it's right there at the parking lot that's next to McDonald's. We're going to start the march there. It'll be about just a half an hour march, just more of a walk or a stroll down to Founders Park. And Founders Park will have some interactive activities for the kids, chalking and other kind of fun things. And then at 11:30, we're going to be planting 50 trees at the historic Oak Hill Cemetery, which the whole idea for that is we're working with What's the Buzz Johnson City, and we're planting trees that are pollinator friendly. We're trying to develop a pollinator corridor from the downtown area to ETSU and then beyond, because we know we're having problems with our bees and other pollinators that we really are dependent on them for our food supply. So this is free. We ask you to come, be respectful. Again, we're organizers. It's not particularly a group, so we don't have insurance. So we want everybody to be very well behaved. We're wanting to just to march to talk about. We're concerned about the climate, and our theme is we protect what we love. So we really all do love Mother Earth, and that's why we've been involved with this. So please come on out next Saturday.
I hope to see many of you out there next Saturday. All right. Well, we are at the end of the day. Thank you so much to everyone that's been here. It's been throughout the day. That's been trickling in. Thanks again to Terry Dosher and all the staff here at Willow Tree. If you wouldn't mind giving Terry and everyone